bags are packed, are you ready to go? This time tomorrow we'll be on the road, riding with you in the sunnier days. I wouldn't want it any other way.
It's time to name the neglect from typical food advice. Welcome to the Find Your Food Voice podcast, hosted by me, Julie Duffy Dillon. I'm a registered dietitian with 20 years of experience partnering with folks just like you on their food peace journey. What have we learned? Well, cookie cutter approaches exclude too many people, and you don't need to be fixed. It's not you. It's not me. It's all of us. Only together we can start a movement and fix diet culture. And we will. Let's begin with now. Hey there, welcome to episode 394 of the Find Your Food Voice podcast. I am Julie Duffy Dillon, registered dietitian and your host, and I have a really special episode today. Today I got a chance to interview Fatima Javanji, who is a therapist and reached out to me to talk about her own complicated experience with food as she was navigating early parenthood. And so I'm really grateful that Fatima was willing to sit down with me and share these really vulnerable experiences that she had. And whether you have experienced breastfeeding or just taking care of a child and having to make decisions based on maybe some food intolerances or just accessibility, I think you're going to find this episode really helpful. And, the thing that Fatima and I really kind of came to after we were done recording is this experience of parenting or taking care of other people. Sometimes it doesn't work out the way we're thinking it's going to. And while things may be okay and we can feel really grateful, there's always this bit of grief because it maybe didn't turn out the way we thought it would. So as you're navigating this episode, as you're listening, we hope that you have permission to move forward in the way that's best for you, that's accessible for you. And again, I'm just really grateful that she was willing to sit down and record this conversation. So before you get to hear from our guest, a very quick word from our sponsor. Welcome back, Fatima. Nice to see you.
Thank you for having me. I can't believe it's been 2 years since we did this.
I can't believe it either. Almost exactly 2 years. And what the last couple years have done, you have experienced lots and lots of changes. So tell us, what's been up with you?
So I had a daughter who's now 14 months old. This is my first time having a child and being a parent. So it's been a huge whirlwind of a change.
Yeah, it's like a shock to the system, right?
Yeah,
it's completely different.
Yeah, everything changes. And I think what's so beautiful and hard about it is how much this little human needs you. And in a way that's different than when you're pregnant, because they always need you when you're pregnant, but it's more of a passive thing, right? Versus once they're on the outside, they need you in very active ways, and there's a different sense of interdependence that develops.
Yes. I remember when I was pregnant with my daughter, who's now 16, the last few months, I remember complaining, just I felt so uncomfortable. My body was I was oh, I'm done with this. I felt like I'd been pregnant for 5 years at that point. And one of my friends who had a couple kids was just remember, she's a lot easier to take care of where she is now than when she comes out. And I was yeah, but I'm so uncomfortable. But no, it's true. Yeah. It's such a big shift in the how our brain experiences life. It just is everything changes. The schedule changes, sleep changes, and yes, it's great, but it's a big change.
And we adapt.
Yeah. That's where all the counseling training comes in handy. It's when you can use it for yourself.
Absolutely. And just practicing acceptance and realizing that you're in a period of transition. And then everything feels different. And it's okay if that feels scary or hard or beautiful all at once.
Exactly. Like we can hold all of those things. And I remember you mentioned when we were emailing about this episode that you experienced some things that impacted your own like relationship with food because of some food intolerances. Would you be willing to share with us like what you experienced and yeah, what
Yeah,
happened?
absolutely. So a lot happened. So I'll try to kind of like streamline it. But
Yeah.
essentially, after my daughter was born, I was not producing colostrum or breast milk. So usually that happens within like a few hours of the baby being born.
Hmm.
And for me, I wasn't even producing colostrum until 4 days after my baby was born. And breastfeeding was something that I really wanted. It was a part of
Mm.
motherhood that I was excited for. Um, and so from the get go, I just remember feeling like my body was not good enough. Like, was I fit to like parent this child if I couldn't even like nourish her from the time she was born? And I think, like, with food, the way it ended up impacting my relationship was I was trying to eat so many galactagogues, like oatmeal and
Oh,
flaxseed and
yes.
brewer's yeast to kind of get that breast milk production going. And so there was just kind of this like hyper focus on eating certain kinds of foods, like to support this like goal that I had. So eventually I was able to produce milk, which was great. But I had this condition that I was also unaware of until I had a baby that makes it difficult for my chest to form in a way that supports a baby to latch.
Okay.
And so, even though I started producing milk, getting my daughter to latch to be able to feed like off the breast was really, really hard. And I tried for 6 months, but like essentially, it wasn't working. And so I
Oh,
was
how hard.
exclusively like pumping. Still am exclusively like pumping. And I think that brought up just a lot of feelings of like, is my body good enough? What's wrong with my
Hmm.
body? And then about 2 months in, while we're still trying to figure out this whole breastfeeding thing, we found out that my daughter had food intolerances. And so it started out with the doctors recommending that we cut out dairy and soy, um, and that she should do better with that. She did not. And then there were
Oh, wow.
more foods that I had to kind of cut out of my diet in order to continue breastfeeding. So for her, we also had to cut out eggs, corn, and beef. Um, and it was really important to me to try to breastfeed. And this was something I really wanted to try to do. And so I was open to kind of making the diet changes. And I learned a lot in the process. I had no idea how much like corn and soy there is, like
Yeah.
even in things that I had no idea. There's like soybean oil or corn flour.
Yes. Yes.
And
Corn and
so
soy are the toughest, I think. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, because I think dairy is something that people are a lot more like aware
Hmm.
of. And so if I went to a restaurant and asked like for a dairy-free meal, like most restaurants would like understand that, but things with like soy or corn were a lot harder. And so my diet became pretty restrictive in that way. And I also couldn't like eat out at restaurants anymore,
Mm.
because we had a couple of experiences where we would like communicate the food intolerances to the restaurant. They would be like, yeah, there's nothing in this. And I would eat, and my daughter like would immediately like have a reaction. And so
Mm.
it got to the point where like I was cooking like all meals, all snacks, like everything at home. Um, and then to make things even better, my daughter still was not growing. And so we were trying to figure out what was going on. And I went from being someone who was not producing any breast milk to producing way too much breast milk.
Oh,
And so
wow.
what was happening is the fat content was getting diluted across all of the milk I was producing. So the milk that she was drinking was not calorically dense enough for her to like
Hmm.
be able to grow. And so then I had to do a bunch of stuff to like bring my milk supply down so that it was calorically dense enough.
That sounds like a
So
roller
just like a lot
coaster.
of different things.
Yeah, that sounds so exhausting in itself. And you're already exhausted with a newborn, no matter how they're feeding. And even when it's like there's not any hiccup or anything, but that sounds like so, yeah, like I could just picture a roller coaster for you. And also like
Yeah.
not being able to go out to restaurants, especially when your baby's really little and just sleeps in a stroller. That's like the chance you have to like get out and socialize. And I don't know how important that is for you, but like for a lot of people, yeah, connecting with other human beings
Yeah.
in real time can feel like, yeah, I just get a picture that you felt or you experienced a lot of isolation.
Yeah. I think the one thing that was really nice was that it was committed to still socializing and being
Hmm.
around people. And I knew I needed that for my own mental health.
Yeah.
And so we would still go out. I would just prep food for myself and take it to a restaurant, and I would just explain. And honestly, most restaurants were like very, very
Oh, that's
understanding
good.
about me bringing
Yeah,
in my own food. And so it didn't prevent me from socializing. I think it just
that's
kind of
good.
changed the sense of like connection that you can have over food, because I was always eating something that was different from other people. Taking trips was harder. Like we did some trips with friends, we traveled internationally. And so there was just like more to plan and prep um, and bring. But I feel very grateful because one, places like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's have had a lot of products that I could use as substitutions that did not have any of
Hmm.
these things my daughter was intolerant of. And we had the financial capacity to be able
Hmm.
to buy those things, which I realized like not everyone does. And also,
Yeah.
even if you're doing formula for the food intolerances, like that formula is really, really
Yes.
expensive.
That's very expensive
Um,
formula. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think having access to those things was really helpful and just made things a lot easier.
Hmm. Well, and you're someone that I've known to be doing the work in like the non-diet space for a while. So what was it like for you to have like these food rules? Did it feel weird?
It was interesting.
Okay.
I think it was okay in the sense that, like, this didn't feel like it was a diet. It felt like this was because of,
Hmm.
like, I was doing this for, like, a medical reason. But a lot of
Hmm.
people made comments to me about, like, "Oh, you're probably gonna lose weight." Because a lot of what I would, like, pack when
Yeah.
we were going out places was salads. Because it was easy because I didn't have to worry
Hmm.
about, like, heating it up, right? Like, you don't always have access to, like, a restaurant or, I mean, a microwave, like, at a restaurant. So I'd
Right.
always do, like, salads when we were going out. So people made a lot of comments like, "Oh, you're gonna lose a lot of weight on this diet, et cetera,
Mm.
et cetera." And I was like, that's not why I'm doing this." And
Yeah.
also newsflash, I did not lose weight, like, doing these food
Yeah.
restrictions, like,
Yeah.
that was not the point, and I still ate really delicious food. I just learned, like, different ways of cooking them. But I think what it ended up doing in my relationship with food is that I developed a, a huge sense of like control, because I was always preparing my own things. And like if we were going out for the day, I would pack like a full day's worth of like food and snacks
Mm.
for myself. I got so used to always being in control of what I was eating and when I was eating, that when it came time to like reintroduce these allergens and like I could eat out or I could maybe like have some flexibility, that it became really hard for me because I
Oh.
suddenly became like really fearful. Like, well, what if there is this allergen like in the food? Even though my daughter was like okay with it, I felt really scared, and it brought up a lot of questions for me around like, what's my purpose? Like, if I'm not following these food rules to nourish my baby in this way, then like, what is my purpose as a parent? Um,
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense because the beginning for you was all about these strategies of like, I have to be the person basically like dodging all these different food restrictions. And so then when you didn't have to do that anymore, they're like, well, then what's my job?
yeah,
Is that what you're
yeah.
saying? Like, it just felt like you didn't have the same kind of role to play.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was just like really scary for me because it was a shifting part of my identity. And I think a lot of people had
Mm.
come to kind of know me for like having these food restrictions, because any social setting we were in, I was always eating something different. So a lot of times people would ask or make comments about it. And so it's kind of like how I became known, even though people knew me before I like had a baby and had these restrictions. And so there was also kind of like a loss of identity, I think, that like came with that. And I had to kind of refigure out like, who am I outside of these food restrictions? And that was really challenging. And even like introducing these allergens to my daughter, like I was really scared because of what we saw her go through in those early days of like, what if she has a reaction? What if it affects her growth? And so I just noticed like becoming really fearful. And then I think the other thing is I noticed that like my food palette had changed a lot. Like these things
Oh,
that I used to
interesting.
love eating, like when I started reintroducing them into my diet, I actually did not like a lot of them because I had stopped eating them for like 9 months, that like they didn't taste good anymore. And so I had to kind of like reacclimate my body to like, what is it like to like eat an egg, for example, which I used to eat eggs all the time prior to having to cut them out. And so it was hard to kind of like help my body learn how to re-like foods that it used to enjoy.
If someone's in the place where you were when you were like maybe in the place where you were having to cut out all these foods to be able to continue to produce milk and feel it, someone who's maybe in that moment feeling overwhelmed, and I'm also thinking like, what did you need back then? Like, what did you need from your community, your support systems, or is there anything that someone could say to help you, or could have helped you in those moments that you wish you had?
Yeah, I think something that was really helpful for me was having both like logistical and emotional support. So
Yeah.
I like my husband was really great about going to different stores and like buying very specific items so that I could still have joy with food, because we were like, if
Oh,
I'm
that's
going to do
great.
this, like I still need to enjoy eating, right? And so having that logistical support of like someone who would go and do the labor of like buying these groceries was so helpful. And then I think the emotional validation of like that I was a good mom, that I was
Mm-hmm.
taking care of my baby even when I felt like I was struggling to, even though
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't like believe those things when people were saying them. I think it was still very helpful to hear it. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt I was lucky enough. I was able to find a lactation consultant who was also a pediatrician, who had lived experience, like with
Oh,
kids who have
wow.
the
The
same
trifecta.
intolerances. And working with her was so helpful because she could scientifically see it from all different angles, and she also understood what my
Mm-hmm.
experience had been. And so I think just being able to like talk to her felt so comforting and made me feel just like less alone about the whole experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the times when you're talking about like connecting with your body not doing what you were expecting it to do, it sounds like
Yeah.
that's the part that has like the most like emotion stuck to it. And like I would imagine, what am I imagining? Like I'm thinking about how that may have been surprising and also still like there still may be pain, and I don't know if pain's the right word, but there's still something there. Would you be willing to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I think it's really hard when you have certain hopes and dreams for what your body's going to be
Yeah.
able to do and how it's going to be able to support your child. And
Mm-hmm.
when it's not able to do that, it's really painful. And it made me just question so much of like, is something wrong with my body? Is my body good enough? And it just felt like my body was failing me and failing my baby. It's in
Mm.
so many ways. Um, and I like, you know, when I was pregnant, I heard a lot of people talk about like body image postpartum and like how that's hard because your body changes so much in pregnancy. But I felt like that was not even, those were not even the thoughts that were crossing my mind, because
Yeah.
my mind was so focused on my body image as it related to like being able to like care for this human, less so like what it was like looking like. And I think, yeah, there's a lot of pain there where I can appreciate that my body was able to sustain life and grow my daughter and eventually was able to produce breast milk for her. But it still felt like there was a betrayal there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I wonder, like, this may be me going into like the fix it mode, but I'm like, I wonder what we can break down in the systems to like prevent people moving forward having that kind of experience, that kind of pain of like, because your body didn't do anything wrong, but like there's, there's these um, beliefs that I remember getting. Breastfeeding was also hard for me, but in a different way. And yeah, I thought it was just going to happen. Like I didn't think that there was going to be any issue, right? And then
Yeah.
meeting with a lactation consultant was like, that saved it. That
Yeah.
was, I still remember like being in the hospital, like I forgot to bring my contacts. And did I not bring I for some reason I didn't have my contacts in and I didn't bring my glasses, something like that. Cause I remember I couldn't see and I was like walking around my hospital room without a shirt on because it was like so painful. Someone walked in my room and I didn't care because, whatever. I just given birth and I was so upset because I wasn't able to feed her. And when I realized who it was, I was like, oh my goodness, thank you for coming into my room. Now help me. And yeah, I wish there was a way we can like locate where this thing is like growing and living in all of us of like we're doing it wrong if we don't do it in this certain way or
Yeah.
and I don't know. I'm like, I think it's just the fix it part of my brain that probably is like, let's change it. And maybe, talking about it is one way we can do that. That like we may have surprises and yeah, we can prepare for some things, but not for all of them. And the thing that I hear from you is like how much you love this baby and like how much you were trying and trying and trying. You were trying everything to be able to make it work. And your partner was also doing everything he could do to like help you to make it work. So that's so beautiful that like just even trying to figure it out. And for some people, maybe they're not going to be able to navigate it in the way you did. And same, like we all love these babies, and like we're just trying the best we can. And I think it's so interesting that like as you were navigating all of this and like how our bodies change postpartum, there is like this flood of comments that people will make. Some of it is like, I think people think they're supposed to tell us that we look good or something. I don't know if you got that weird kind of, you look great. And I'm like, I just made a person. Why are you commenting about my body? Like, look at this magic I just did.
I had people tell me, "Oh, you still look pregnant." 2 days after I gave birth, I was like, "Yeah, it's
why are
been
people
2
talking
days."
about bodies? Yeah. Yeah. That was something that I wish people would have told me. Like how like that like if you had a body that had a pregnancy kind of belly, that it would take a while for that to go down. No one told me that. But when you were doing all those restrictions, how people were making comments too, that is, I would imagine that was pretty shocking and like that kind of gives me the ick.
Yeah, and like I was pretty open with people about like the reason that I was doing it, right? So people knew like this was coming from a place of like my daughter having these intolerances, and it was not me on a diet. It was not me trying to change my body. But I think, that's reflective of a lot of the things that they're probably struggling with. That like when they see someone kind of cutting out these things, not being able to eat a lot of desserts because they have eggs and dairy, etc. in most desserts. I think that's like it was reflecting to them like something that they're still like working through and struggling with. And on the flip side, like I had other people who were also like quite dismissive of the issue where they would be like,
Yes,
"Oh no,
I'm
you
sure.
can eat this. There's like nothing in it." And I'd be like, "Okay, can you tell me what you put in it?" And I'd be like, "No, but you just said you put like corn in this. So no,
Yeah.
like I can't eat it. They'd be like, no, but it'll be fine. I'm like, no, this is a serious thing. Like I have seen my daughter not eat. I've seen her not grow like as a result of like
Mm-hmm.
having these foods. So it's not important enough to me to try this like really delicious thing you made if it means that it's going to be affecting my I think, you know, with the identity piece, I think there were some people who saw this as like a diet weight loss option and kind of like put me on a pedestal for
Mm.
following these food restrictions of like, oh, you have great discipline, like, you know, your body's going to be looking great after this. Um, and I can understand where it comes from, but none of this for me was coming from a place of discipline. It was just me trying to fulfill a goal that I had to the best
Mm-hmm.
that I could do it.
Yeah, yeah. Mm. I could appreciate how that got woven into, though, when you were able to move away from excluding these foods, how that made it more challenging. Because,
Yeah.
yeah, that's how people were kind of, that was one of the identities you just developed, you know? Oh,
Yeah.
so if someone's listening and like they just got this news, they have to cut out all the things you just said, what do you want to say to them?
I think before I answer that, there was actually one more thing that came to mind that I think is like, you
Yeah.
know, would be important to share. And I think in this experience, I developed a lot of like fear and scarcity mindset around food. And that's something that I'm still
Yeah, that makes
dealing with.
sense.
Um, and I think it was a mix of like, I always had to like be on top of like the grocery list and the meal planning because there was this fear that like, well, if I don't do this, like we will go hungry because we won't have food, we won't be able to order out. We
Mm-hmm.
just don't have that like flexibility. And so I think I just grew a lot of like fear mindset, but there was also like scarcity mindset because there would be some times where like my husband will go grocery shopping and the store's not carrying like this particular like item
Yeah.
that week. And so then that would kind of like throw off like the, you know, the menu that I had like planned for the week. And so then I also kind of got into this mindset of like buying multiples of things that were like, you know, for as long as they would
Mhm.
last. Because I never wanted to like run short or like be out of things. And so even though like now I'm not following these food restrictions and we can order out, we can be flexible. Sometimes I still buy multiple of things that I don't actually need multiple of because I'm just scared. And
Yeah, there's
like
something in
I
your
remember,
brain that's like, yeah, be prepared.
yeah,
That reminds me a lot of like the diet mindset for a lot of people who have
yeah,
chronically dieted, how that lingers for years and years. And yeah, so I hope you're being gentle with yourself when you notice yourself doing that. Like it may take a while for it to like ease
yeah,
up, right? I mean, it's just your body and your mind are still repairing, you know,
yeah,
and yeah. Oh my
yeah. It's
goodness.
something I'm still actively practicing. Like it's really hard to like
Yeah.
go to the store and like just buy one of something.
Mm.
And like I have to kind of stand there and like talk to myself and be like, no, like it's okay. Like you can come back next week. Like if you only need
Hmm.
one, like just take one. I think, like you said, it's a lot of like unlearning, and I think it's going to take
Hmm.
some time to kind of to change that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for adding that too, because I think that's something that's going to be helpful for someone who maybe is in the beginning to know that's ahead. This can happen to anybody, right? Like most people don't know that they're going to have to do this type of exclusions with food. And for
Yeah,
people who are recovering from an eating disorder or recovering from dieting, yeah, I hope they can like pull from their like toolbox of like, be kind to yourself and gentle with as you're like navigating this and then as you move away from having to cut out things because maybe the reason behind it is different than other times maybe someone's excluded a food, but it can still have the
yeah,
same kind of impact, and
exactly.
so how about
Yeah.
we end on, yeah, any words you'd have for someone who's in the middle or maybe just beginning this process of having to, I don't know, they're just starting that roller coaster that you described.
Yeah.
What do you wish they knew?
I wish they knew that it's going to be okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I think in the beginning, it can be really scary and hard. I know when I started making those transitions, like there were times where I had slip ups. Like I didn't realize there was like dairy in
Yeah.
something, and I accidentally ate it, and halfway through, I'd be like, "Uh oh, like I ate this thing," and then I would end up feeling like really guilty about it. But it's okay when those things happen, right? Like you're trying the best you can, um, and if it's something that you've never done before, it's normal to like need time to get used to like looking out for these allergens. Um, and so I think having that patience and grace with oneself is so important, and realizing that like it's also okay to use formula. Like in my journey,
Yeah.
there were times where we used formula because I was transitioning like into the diet, or we were traveling, or what have you. Um, and it's okay. The most important thing is that your baby is taken care of, right? And you are trying to do that in whatever ways you can. And if you want to try cutting out these allergens and, see if you can maintain breastfeeding, that's great. If you find that, this is not something you want to do or something that you can do, or you feel like it's triggering old behaviors or triggering an eating disorder, that's also okay. Like
Yeah.
you don't have
Yeah.
to do this. Like we are so lucky that we live in a world that has these allergen friendly formulas that ensure that our babies can be nourished, and that we don't have to carry that full responsibility if we're not wanting to, or if we're not able to.
For you, the listener, I just want to give you a little, I don't know, just a little bit behind the scenes. We were chatting after we stopped recording, which is what we always do, and decided that we had a few more things to say. So, what I'm wondering is, what advice would you give someone who's deciding whether or not to do like the food restrictions or to use formula? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think there's so many different factors to consider. I think the first thing is giving yourself time and space to grieve, right? Grieve that perhaps this journey of nourishing your baby does not look like what you were hoping it would look like. And it's okay to grieve that. I know for myself, I felt a lot of guilt, I felt a lot of shame. Um, and then I also felt bad for like struggling and like feeling
Mm,
sad about all of it. And so I had to give myself that space and that patience to recognize that it was hard. And I think already like having a child is difficult, right? Like they communicate to you in ways that are different from the ways that we're used to communicating, because they don't have the verbal language that we often have to communicate what's going on with our bodies or how we're feeling. And so you're trying to figure out what's happening for your baby. You know they're not okay, and you don't exactly know why, and you don't exactly know how to fix it. And I think as a parent, you have to give yourself that grace and patience that like you are trying your very best. And as you're making decisions about, how to go about this nourishment journey, I think it's important to reflect on like what is your goal? What do
mm,
you want to do? What do you feel like you have capacity for, and what do you have access to? Right? If you are wanting to go the route of making these food restrictions, is it something that is going to be okay for your mental health? Because for some people, it might trigger eating disorder behaviors, whether that
mhm.
might be new behaviors, maybe it triggers an eating disorder, disordered eating that you already struggled with. Perhaps you have other medical conditions that you also need to manage, and adding in the food restrictions might make that harder for you. Also, just thinking from like a time perspective, right? If you're having to like meal prep so much and buy special
Yeah.
groceries, like do you have the time and energy for that? Do you have the financial capacity for that? Um, and do you want to do it? right? Like, how does it end up impacting your relationship with your baby? I remember for myself at one point, I was thinking about like, how much time am I spending on cooking all this food and pumping, and is it taking away from the quality of time that I'm spending with my baby? And there were times
Mm-hmm.
where I considered stopping because I was like, actually, maybe this is like taking away from that joy of parenting because I'm so focused on trying to get all these things right. Um, and so, if it feels like that's not the right choice for you, I think formula is also a really great
Mm-hmm.
option. It ensures that your baby is nourished. There's still so many ways to bond with baby when you're feeding through a bottle. It's something I had to learn since I did not end up having that typical breastfeeding journey. And if it makes you feel better, it makes your baby feel nourished, that's all that matters. At the end of the day, all that
Mm-hmm.
matters is you and the child and your family, and that you're
Yeah.
together and
Mm-hmm.
feeling loved.
Yeah.
So
Like it's the
I would say,
relationship. Yeah. More than like how you're feeding. It's like that you are feeding
yes,
and yeah,
totally.
and that you're maintaining that relationship. Yeah. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's so important that we name all of that, because what one person's able to do and the choices that they have to make, it doesn't like that's all being a good mom, or a good
Hmm.
parent is, choosing whatever option. And there's certainly folks that I've worked with when they were clients of mine who um, the only way that they could recover from their eating disorder was to use formula. Like it just wasn't going to be a way for them to
Hmm.
be able to not use formula and maintain some kind of recovery. And that was like really brave, to be able
Yeah.
to do that for themselves. And yeah, I always think about them of like, I hope they know that they made the hard choice, and that was really, really
Yeah.
important. And yeah, and finding a way to do the diet changes if you're able to do that and that works for you, then that's great too. So I'm glad we jumped back on and
Me
clarified
too.
this. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And a book that I was just thinking about is
Oh yeah.
something that my lactation consultant had recommended to me. It's called Good Moms Have Scary Thoughts. I actually think
Ooh.
this is a great book for like all parents, like regardless of whether you were the one who was carrying the child or not, regardless of like
Mm-hmm.
your sex or gender. I think it highlights a lot of these fear-based thoughts that parents have, especially in those early days, a lot of which have to do around like food and body, but the book covers like the whole range of them. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that was something that was really, really helpful for my husband and I as we were kind of navigating
Oh.
these food intolerances and just trying to grow our little one.
Mm. That's a good recommendation. I'll have to check that out. So
Yeah.
if someone wants to know more about the work you're doing, where can they find you?
You can find me at my website, which is fjshakir, shakir.com, or you can find me on Instagram at your South Asian therapist.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Fatima. I feel just so like honored that she was willing to be vulnerable and share her experience with us. And if you would like to get to know more of her work or find any of the resources mentioned in this episode, they will be in the show notes for you. And we'll also make sure that we put the episode that she was in before 2 years ago also in the show notes so you can hear more about what she has to say about her own relationship with food and steps moving forward. So, if you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you would follow or subscribe, and we will be here next week for another Find Your Food Voice episode. Until then, take care.